So let me ask you a question. What is reality actually made of? I mean, really. It sounds so simple, right? But it is one of the oldest, deepest puzzles in all of science and philosophy. Do we live in a universe made of separate, individual things, like tiny little building blocks? Or is reality more like a dynamic, interconnected web of relationships? Let's dive into this because the answer, well, it challenges our most basic ideas about the world and even about who we are. You've definitely heard this line before, right? It's from the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus, and we usually take it to mean one thing. Everything is always changing. Everything is in this constant, chaotic state of flux. The world is a whirlwind, and you can never really grab hold of it. It's a cool idea, for sure, but is that simple idea of chaos really the whole story? Well, like a lot of famous quotes that get passed around, the real meaning is, oh, it's so much more subtle and honestly way more interesting. The version we all know and love, that actually comes from Plato's take on it, centuries later. Yeah, see, the popular myth is that the river is just this symbol of pure, uncontrollable change, a reality that's always slipping through your fingers. But what Heraclitus was actually getting at is so much more profound. He wasn't saying the river loses its identity because the water is changing. He was arguing that the constant flow of new water is precisely what makes it a river in the first place. Its identity, its stability, comes directly from its constant change. And look, here are his actual words. Did you catch that? He explicitly says the rivers are staying the same, even as other and other waters flow. So the key isn't just the change, it's that the river is this persistent structure, the stable pattern that only exists because its parts are always moving. And this just sums it all up perfectly in 3 words. Changing, it rests. It sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? But it's not a contradiction at all. It means the identity of some things isn't found in what they're made of, but in the process they're going through. Heraclitus even gave us this fantastic down-to-earth analogy. Think about a barley drink. If you let it sit still, it's going to separate pretty quickly into gunk at the bottom and water on top. It only exists as a unified drink while it's being stirred. Its very being depends entirely on motion and change. So, you see, Heraclitus' river opens up this massive philosophical showdown that's been going on for more than 2,000 years. Is the world fundamentally made of static things, or is it all about dynamic connections and processes? And this ancient battle has given us 2 completely different ways of seeing everything. So in one corner, you've got what we call substantiationalism. This is the idea championed by thinkers like Democritus. It says that if you could zoom all the way in at the very bottom of reality, you just find tiny, separate, indivisible things, atoms, bouncing around in empty space. Reality is basically just a giant collection of these fundamental objects. And in the other corner, you've got relationalism. Plato, for example, argued that the most fundamental thing isn't some tiny substance, but something he called dunamis, which is the power or the capacity to relate to other things, to affect them and be affected by them. For a relationalist, nothing can exist all by itself. To exist is to be connected. So you end up with 2 totally different pictures of the universe. One is like a big box of marbles, where everything is separate, and the space between them is real. The other is more like a spider's web, where everything is interconnected, separation is just an illusion, and the real basic unit of existence is the connection itself. Now, for a long, long time, this wasn't really a fair fight. One of these views pretty much dominated Western thought. As we charged into the modern scientific era, the worldview of things won a massive victory. That ancient idea of atoms got a major upgrade from Isaac Newton. His mechanics gave us a cosmos of predictable objects, moving according to perfect, unbreakable laws. This vision of a clockwork universe, this vast, intricate, and perfectly deterministic machine, it defined how we saw the world for centuries. And this quote right here, this is the ultimate expression of that whole idea. The physicist Laplace imagined this super intellect, a demon, that could know the exact location and speed of every single atom in the universe. For that demon, he said, the future would be as clear as the past. This is the absolute peak of the world of things, a universe where everything is locked in, with no room for chance, only predictable facts. But then, right at the start of the 20th century, that entire beautiful clockwork picture just got completely smashed to pieces. A new kind of physics came along that just didn't play by the old rules of simple, separate things. And that, of course, was quantum mechanics. All of a sudden, the clean, predictable world of Newton was gone, and in its place was this bizarre, fuzzy quantum reality.
We found particles that could be in many places at once. We learned that a particle's properties, like its position, weren't even fixed until you looked. And we discovered that two particles could be mysteriously linked across the entire universe, instantly. The old idea of a world made of tiny, independent billiard balls was failing, and it was failing spectacularly. So, faced with all this quantum weirdness, some physicists and philosophers started to think, wait a second, maybe those ancient relational guys were onto something. Maybe reality isn't about things at all. Maybe, just maybe, it's about relationships. The old debate was suddenly back on the table. But this comeback story for relationalism wasn't so simple. It actually branched into two very distinct, very different paths for what relational even means. And this right here is the critical distinction for understanding where things are at today. Okay, let's break this down. On one side, you have what's called epistemic relationalism. This is the idea that our knowledge of reality is always relative to us, the observer. Properties only exist when we measure them. On the other side, though, you have ontological relationalism, and this is a much more radical idea. It says that reality itself, the actual fabric of existence, is the network of relations, and it exists that way whether we're looking at it or not. And what's incredible is that you can trace these modern physics ideas all the way back to their ancient roots. The first one, where everything depends on the observer, that sounds a whole lot like the sophist Protagoras, who famously said, "Man is the measure of all things." But the second one, ontological relationalism, that is the true modern heir to Plato's idea that to be is to relate, a belief in a real, objective web of connections out there. And it's this second path, ontological relationalism, that offers a truly revolutionary way to think about the universe. It suggests that our whole focus on individual things might have been the fundamental mistake all along. In this picture, the universe isn't a box full of particles. It's one vast, dynamic web of interactions. There are no fundamental things at all, only fundamental relationships. What we see as a particle is just a stable little knot, a persistent pattern in this cosmic web, just like Heraclitus' river. Which, of course, brings us all the way back to the ultimate question. If this radical view of reality is even close to right, then what does that make you? Are you a separate, isolated self, a thing looking out at the world? Or are you, just like the river, a stable process, a dynamic pattern of relationships whose very existence depends on constant change and connection? Are you a process in the flow?